Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with reference recordings. And today we're talking about Prokofiev's Symphony Number 6. Now, this is one of those wonderful things. Some of you have said, well, are there any more recent reference recordings, like from the digital era and whatnot? And the answer is yes, there are. But it depends on the repertoire, and this is one of them. Because the reference recording is Neeme Järvi with the Scottish National Orchestra on Chandos. Now, this was recorded in 1985, which is very late as far as reference recording goes. And the fact of the matter is, nobody even knew there needed to be a reference recording for the Sixth Symphony until this came out and became the reference recording. That's an interesting story, isn't it? Prokofiev's symphonies, there are a lot of factors involved, let's put it that way. And not the least of which is the reputation of Prokofiev's symphonies. He had two famous ones, right? Number 1, the classical symphony, and number 5, the big romantic one that everybody plays that has all the good tunes. The others, not so much. Number 2 is an experimental, noisy, avant-garde piece in the form of one of Beethoven's last piano sonatas, an introductory allegro and then a big theme and variations. Number 3 is based on his opera, The Fiery Angel, and it's like an expressionistic nightmare. I love number 3, but it's an acquired taste. Let's put it that way. You have to like horror movie music. That's what it is. Number 4 is based on his ballet, The Prodigal Son, and it exists in 2 versions. One rather light and frothy, the other heavier duty and more socialist realist, and neither of them popular with anybody. And number 7, the last one, he wrote for a youth orchestra or something. It's a simple piece in his in his Romeo and Juliet-ish kind of ballet style. Very simple melodies. It's a beautiful work, a soulful work. It has 2 possible endings, one quiet, one and then a coda with a loud ending that you can attach if you feel like it. All of these works derived from other works and experimental in some ways. They all gave people a sense that as a symphonist he wasn't terribly serious. But the sixth is in many ways his symphonic masterpiece. It's his biggest and grandest symphony, and certainly his deepest emotionally, from an emotional, expressive point of view. It's a World War II-ish piece, and it's full of tension and anguish. It's in an unusual form. It has 3 big movements, the second of which is this gigantic andante that drifts through a whole landscape of ideas and sonorities before recapitulating those ideas and sonorities. It's a big piece, very big piece. What are the timings here? 14 minutes for the first movement, 15 minutes for the largo, the slow movement, and then 11 minutes for the finale. So that's a major, major work. But it didn't get much attention. It's not as obviously tuneful as the 5th. The ending is victory snatched from the jaws of defeat at the very, very last second. It's a very equivocal ending. It's not the kind of thing that Prokofiev is supposed to be. Prokofiev is, when he's not being an avant-garde, whatever that we can just ignore, is supposed to be very direct, straightforward, wrong note romanticism, pretty tunes that have, some tricks thrown in to just keep us off base. But, no one takes him all that seriously as a composer of real depth. But this symphony has it. It's as big and tragic a work as like one of the big Shostakovich symphonies that were being written at the same time. And so for that reason, it didn't get a lot of play. It really didn't. I mean, it was either part of a cycle, as for example, Martinon's Prokofiev cycle that he did for Vox, which isn't very good, frankly. It's one of Martinon's few fails, probably mostly because of the sonics and the orchestral playing. It just doesn't come off. And there were, of course, some Soviet Prokofiev cycles. They'd done them, but they were on Melodia and they sounded awful and you couldn't really get them very easily. And they didn't make the best case for this particular piece for those reasons, the screechy sound and the sort of brash, raw, edgy playing. And then there were performances, that started to take shape in the West. There was like Walter Weller's Prokofiev cycle, and a few other people did complete Prokofiev cycles. But I don't think in those performances, in those cycles, the 6th made as big an impression as it should have. Eugene Ormandy recorded it with Philadelphia. A pretty good performance too, but it was buried as soon as it came out. Sony just went, no, it's not popular enough, and so it disappeared, and then was released on Odyssey on an LP, and it's in the Japanese Ormandy edition Columbia box. It's going to come back with all the Columbia Ormandy recordings remastered, hopefully, and then we can really take its measure afresh, which needs to be done. But in the meantime, so you have a very popular composer whose symphonic masterpiece is as good as unknown by the general public. It happens to be sonically splendiferous when recorded well, and it was lacking a really outstanding performance that everybody could say, wow, this is really something special. In other words, the time was ripe for a fabulous recording of Prokofiev's Fifth to assume the status of the reference edition. And here it was. Järvi came along and simply blew the roof off with this performance of Prokofiev's Sixth. And this was very smart. Everything about this was smart. You have a very, very good orchestra, terrific sonics, but more to the point, Järvi did a huge series of Prokofiev recordings for Chandos, including the complete symphony cycle. And this was the first. This was the first issue, the first release in that burgeoning cycle. And that was such a smart thing to do, because had it been the Fifth or had it been the classical symphony, everyone would have said, well, it's been done a million times, and the Scottish National Orchestra isn't the greatest thing in the world, and who the hell is Neeme Järvi, and blah, 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 blah. Right? That's what would have happened. But instead, he did this one and revealed, first of all, what a masterpiece it is, and second of all, what a fabulous conductor he is, and how great the orchestra sounded, and how terrific the engineers were, and it turned in a stunner of a performance. And it's been the reference recording ever since, even though there have been other very fine recordings since this. There have. But as usual in the classical music world, sometimes he who does it first gets the palm in terms of reference recordings, even if it's not the best performance. Here we have one of those circumstances where, if not the absolute best, it's one of the very best for sure. No question about that. And it was the one that taught us the work. And that's what a reference recording really does it, right? It teaches us the piece. It tells us what it is, what to expect, reveals its potential, and leaves room for others to come along too and tell us something else about it that this may not. But told us a heck of a lot. There's not a lot that this performance leaves unsaid. It's a fabulous record, and clearly the reference recording for the work. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.